Hi, everyone. In our last segment of Learning Together, we're really thinking about building professional capacity. And as educators, we really realize that in each point of our professional career, we're really never finished being learners. So we have students in front of us with differentiated needs or social emotional support that we need to provide for students. And in the 21st century, the demands for students are always increasing, and it feels like we're always trying to think of new ways to support students to build their capacity. So one thing we want to really think critically about is our ability to be present. And so sometimes attending a professional development session is not the same thing as being present within a professional learning community. So we want to really always assess and think about, why am I here? So for those of you who've been in teaching for a number of years, sometimes it feels like information being presented to us are things that we've heard before in the past, or maybe the lens for the professional learning community is more for a novice teacher or a teacher who's just beginning to build their capacity as an educator. And we all know how difficult that can be. And so within our professional learning communities, we really want to think about our values and how we're interacting with one another as we're being present. And so it's really a large task to take on as a veteran teacher, and really sharing your insights and your thinking and really leading with inquiry. So sometimes as we're listening to knowledge that sometimes is new to us, or sometimes are messages we've heard in the past, what is that one takeaway? What's that piece of information that really shifts your thinking? And while you're being present and while you're really being intentional that you're in that professional learning community, what are those questions that you have? What's that information that you're trying to uncover? Or what's that piece of information that you heard or that you're going to research and find more information about on your own? So through collaborative processes, we really want to work with one another and really think about, what does that community look like, and how do you play a huge role in that community to be able to build professional capacity? So one thing we want to think about as we're even thinking about, I'm going to put this over here, because I really feel like as we're leading with inquiry and questions, we're really reflecting and assessing at all times. And so we have a global perspective of, what are all the students in our school need, or what does our grade level need, or what does my curriculum area need as a content area teacher? So what do your colleagues need, and what do students need? So no matter what we do, whether it's a professional learning community, if we're taking on new learning objectives ourselves as teachers, or whether we're teaching in the classroom, we always want to find evidence of what we've engaged in for gaining new knowledge throughout our journey. And so if we're thinking about working with students, whatever we've taught along the way, we want to find evidence in student talk, in conferring with students, in students interacting with one another, and in students' products. So that reflection process becomes, oh, here's evidence of my teaching. And then thinking about, well, if I'm not seeing enough of it, what do I have to reflect on, and what do I have to do differently? So sometimes it's easy to blame students and say, oh, that student's really not engaged. Or if their parents worked with them more at home, or if they'd only get their homework done. And granted, all of these are huge factors that as educators we think about, or if I only had these other resources to provide for students. But as educators, I feel like we're always intentional and problem solvers, and we're going to think about ways to support students to give them the most access as possible. But that reflection process is really important in our role to think about, what's next? What do I need to provide next? And when we're trying to think about this, we really think about who's involved. Who are the stakeholders that interact with students? So we know that as a professional learning community, and at building our professional practice that we're not the only ones that engage with our students. And sometimes as we're building professional capacity, we forget about all the other stakeholders that are involved with our students. And we really want to take a step back and think about the context of learners and think about who's interacting with each student. And sometimes students who have the most difficulty and learning challenges, we create more barriers for them by not thinking about stakeholders and the investment that they have in our professional learning communities. And so when we think about calibrated assessment and calibrated instruction, we want to be sure that all stakeholders are providing some similarity, some similar structures, some similar academic language proceeding forward to teach learners. Otherwise, by having a different learning structure or different activities or a different lens on the learning, students feel a huge disconnect from when they are either in a small group within your classroom or in a group outside of your classroom. All of those factors play a role in building the capacity of your students because they don't have a global perspective. So we want to be sure as we're thinking about building professional capacity that we're engaging stakeholders, that we're being present in thinking about how we can engage them, how can we best collaborate with them, how can we share data and information so that we know that when I work with a student, or when a special education teacher works with a student, or an additional resource person meets with students, that we're all sort of talking the same language and that we're all looking for the same expectations from students, and that when we look through an assessment lens, we know what the teaching needs to look like and what the instruction needs to sound like. So it's not just the what students need to learn, it's how they need to learn it. So this is a huge role in our literacy leadership. So we all need to be leaders of literacy. So if we think about our responsibilities throughout this entire textbook or throughout the entire course, we really have a role in literacy leadership because we know that literacy provides access to knowledge and that globally we all have a role in building students' capacity in literacy in order for them to become productive and engaged citizens. So next time you're really engaged in your community or reflecting about your school or thinking about next steps, really think about that professional capacity within yourself and globally for everyone within your school district or community.